Welcome back, everyone who was here last week. I hope you finished your bottles of Vermentino. And welcome to all of our new participants. To give you an idea of what we're doing is every week we're tasting a different wine using the WSET systematic approach to tasting. Okay, when we're going to talk about both the level 2 systematic approach and also a little bit about the difference between the level 2 and level 3. Okay, so I'll introduce a wine, give you some details, and then taste through together. And whilst that's happening, Jacopo will very kindly help answer questions because I get very distracted by the wine. And I know that some of you, just before we start, have been worried about finding the exact wine, because obviously it's important that we're tasting systematically. So we have released the list of the wines for the rest of the tastings, but in reality, it's not so important if you cannot find the exact wine, okay? Because what we're trying to do is, one, teach you about the systematic approach, but also look for wines with typicity, okay? So if you can't find the exact wine that's on our list, look for the grape variety and also the vintage, okay? Because vintage, as we're going to speak about today, is, ciao Stevie, she's raising her bottle, is also really important. So I'll do a little intro to the wine and then we'll get tasting. This is the Cantina Antonione. I apologize for the pronunciation. Okay, so Caggiano. Sorry, it's a Taurasi DOCG, okay, 2015. Now, Taurasi DOCG doesn't have to be 100% Aglianico, okay? It can be 15% of another local grape variety. So quite often you will see growers using a little bit of Piedi Rosso just to soften the tannins. But we wanted to introduce you to a very typical Taurasi Aglianico, so it is 100%, okay? And of course, because we're in Taurasi, we're in Campania. These are grapes that are harvested at the end of October and the beginning of November. Those of you who have some familiarity with wines, maybe you've done your level 2 or you're starting your level 3, you'll know that actually this is quite late. Okay, I'm going to talk about why that might be important. Okay. In terms of the winemaking, stainless steel temperature control, so no oak during the winemaking. Instead, we have 12 to 18 months in barrique after fermentation. Okay, now Taurasi DOCG wines have to be aged for a minimum of a year, but the guys for this wine do leave it for a little bit longer. Somewhere between 12 and 18 months, depending on how their harvest goes. Okay? So we're going to think a little bit, because what I want to be talking about, as I said last week, is connecting the theory that's behind the wine. So thinking about where it comes from, the winemaking process, and what we taste in the glass. So we want to be thinking about these things like a later harvest time, a little bit of time in oak. Also, we've got a 2015. So coming up on 5 years old, so we might have some bottle age at play, okay? So things to think about before we taste this wine and what we might expect. What might we expect from later harvest grapes, okay? More ripeness, okay? Potentially more sugar, less acid, but potential for more alcohol. Remember that as you're harvesting later, you've got this dip of acid, this rise of sugar, and with a rise of sugar, you've also got this potential for alcohol. So one of the things we might be expecting from this wine is, yeah, maybe lesser acidity, but particularly that alcohol level, okay? The barrique aging should be presenting itself in our tertiary characteristics, okay? So we have primary characteristics that come from the grape, secondary characteristics that come from the winemaking, okay? And tertiary characteristics that come from this aging period. So we have secondary, so we have aging in oak, and then we have tertiary, which is the bottle age. Okay. So a couple of things to be thinking about in terms of how this has been harvested and made. And finally, in thinking about Taurasi in particular, and the Aglianico from Campania, tends to be the most floral expression. So we should be, when we come to the nose, looking for those floral characters as well as the others. So I hope you've all got your glasses at the ready. First thing we're going to do is look for the appearance. So you're going to tilt your glass at 45 degrees over the white background. Okay. Now, you might be expecting with 5 years age for this to be showing the age in the glass, but actually it's not, okay? You might be expecting to see on the rim of the glass, on the edge, a kind of orangey brown character. You're not getting any of that. Actually, it's a little bit blue, which indicates that maybe this wine has a lot more potential, okay? So it's still a very, very clearly ruby wine. And when I look down, I can't see through it at all. So this is a deep ruby wine, okay? And let's have a smell. Okay, I don't have to get anywhere near this wine to get the aromas. Remember, when we're talking about intensity, it's not how quickly your nose is filled with the warmth of wine or alcohol. Okay, you're looking for positive characteristics of fruit or of something else that indicates what's come from the wine. And this for me is clearly pronounced. I'm all the way back here. There's a clear gap between my nose and the glass. Okay, so this is a pronounced wine. And thinking about the difference between level 2, where you have this 3-part scale, okay, of light, medium, or pronounced, and then level 3, where it would seem that we have a 5-point scale: light, medium minus, medium, medium plus, pronounced. Actually, that's not strictly true, because you still have this 3-point scale, okay? You still have light, medium, and pronounced. You just have more nuance in this middle bracket of medium. However, if I am going to give this pronounced for level 2, by my very nature of the scale, it has to also be pronounced for level 3. Okay? So this is one of the ways that can help you at your level 3 when you're thinking about those nuances, okay, is pair it back to the 3-point scale. Where is it in the 3-point scale? If it's medium plus, it's still medium, okay? But this is not, it's pronounced. So what can we smell? Wow, there's a lot going on in this wine. So let's break it down into those primary, secondary, and tertiary, okay? So from the grape, when I'm first starting with a wine, particularly with a red wine, I'm always thinking about fruit, okay? Because the grape is a fruit, therefore there's always going to be some kind of fruit in the wine. So for me, this has both black fruit and red fruit. Okay, but the fruit is really quite fresh still. So I'm getting cranberry, red cherry, dark plum, but also a little bit of blackberry and blueberry. Then I'm beginning to think about, it is incredibly floral, and all of those florals for me sit in this kind of purple bracket. Okay, it's violet, iris, and also some dried lavender. And this is another thing that is crucial for me about this wine, is using the terminology dried, okay? Because the other thing I get with the fruit is dried figs and dried prunes. This is where this wine begins to demonstrate that little bit of age, okay? Where we've got these fresh fruits that you can smell, like the plum, that are becoming dried with this aging, so into prune, okay? So that's my primary characteristics. So remember, secondary comes from my winemaking. I'm expecting oak, and it's there. It's quite subtle. They've managed to maintain the fruit of the wine very well, but I do get this kind of aromatic oak character, okay? Clove, nutmeg, for me a little bit of juniper as well, okay? Cedar. It's all quite fresh oak characteristics, okay? I'm not getting very powerful smoke and toast. It's much fresher than that. The spice is fresher. And then we think about tertiary, okay? So again, we've talked a little bit about the tertiary in the fruit, this prune, this fig, this move from fresh to dried fruit. I'm also getting this kind of leather, slightly meaty, and also for me, a slight graphite note, a bit like when you sharpen a pencil, okay? And that's something I personally particularly find in wines that are showing some age that have come from volcanic soils or very particular soils. It's a very difficult thing to describe, saying pencil shavings. I know that doesn't sound attractive, but for me, it's a real note that I find. So as you can see, lots going on. So let's give it a taste. As I said last week, it's really important to taste in a systematic way. That's why we call it the systematic approach to tasting. Okay? Don't try and find everything at once. Okay, your brain just gets confused. I know mine does. Focus your mind on something in particular that you are looking for. So for me, I start with the sweetness and the acidity, because they're quite easy things to tell together. So have your first taste and taste for sweetness and acidity. Okay, straight away, this is a completely dry wine, but it's also high acid. And the reason I know that straight away is the other thing I cannot help but notice on my first taste is the tannin, okay? The tannin, as we would expect from Aglianico, whilst it's very ripe, remember we've had this long hang time, really ripe tannins, there are a lot of them, okay? And the reason that this isn't an unpleasant wine, the reason it's not unbalanced, it has great balance, is because of the acidity. So even though you've had this late harvest, you've maintained the acidity. Aglianico is a naturally very acidic grape. So you have this matching of acidity, so that watering in your mouth, yeah, with the drying in your mouth. And actually, whilst they're both high, they balance each other out perfectly. So you've managed to do sweetness, acid, tannin in one little block. And remember again, if you're thinking about tannin for your level 3, if it's high for level 2, it's still high at level 3. It's still this 3-point scale. Okay. So let's have a think about alcohol. Now we have some expectations already, given that we know about this slightly later harvest. If you're struggling with telling alcohol levels, particularly at level 3 and also level 4 when you come to it, because at level 4 you have to give an alcohol level, okay? Try and get some air through the wine and take the alcohol a little bit to the back of your throat. Also, if you're drinking the wine, that will help. I'm spitting. But if you're looking for whether you can feel the alcohol in the back of your throat, whether it's perceptible, barely noticeable, or very warm, okay? Yeah, for me, there's no doubt. It's warm on the back of my throat. It is my first glass of the day. Might not be yours, which means alcohol always feels a little bit warmer, but like acid always feels a little bit stronger. But there is a clear warmth that sticks around. So this is high alcohol, and it is actually 14.5. So that is in that high alcohol bracket. Okay. So now we're going to taste again. Think about body, how it feels in your mouth. Does it feel like water? Does it feel like cream? Or does it feel like mango juice? But again, you should have some expectations, knowing that you've got high tannin, knowing that you've got high alcohol, you should have some expectations about the body. Yeah. With this wine, the thing that trips you up is the acidity. Okay. Lots of people I know for a diploma or a level 3 exam would put this in medium plus, okay? It's not. It's a full-bodied wine. You can really feel the texture. It's coming from that glycerin from the alcohol. It's coming from the tannins. What trips you up on your palate is the mouth-watering acidity, okay? And again, this is why, particularly at level 2, when we talk a lot about balance, why it's so important to think about all of those structural components together and what they do with the wine, okay? So tasting for flavor, intensity, and characteristics. I'm going to give it one last taste. And also whilst doing that, because I quite often can link flavor, intensity and finish together, I'm going to give it one final taste, see if it matches on the palate what I'm expecting from what I've had on the nose, and thinking about how intense it is and how long it lasts. Okay, so this is where the wine just falls down a little bit for me, because for me, the flavor intensity is medium. Okay? You're lacking that richness of fruit, those powerful levels that I was getting on the nose. Okay, so it's medium for level 2. If I was talking in level 3, I probably would be bumping it into the medium plus, okay, because you've got to think about the complexity that's there as well, but it's still in that medium bracket. Okay. The characteristics are definitely what I was expecting. I'm losing the floral. The floral is lost on the palate a little bit, but instead I'm getting this richness of fruit, okay? I've just seen a question about body. I'm just gonna flag that to come back to it. Thank you. And for me, again, the finish is medium. It's just lacking a little bit on the length. I would just like for there to be a little bit more push through, because what sticks around for me is a little bit of the alcohol and a little bit of the tannin. And remember, when we talk about finish in a wine, what we're talking about is the positive characteristics of the wine. Yeah, so the fruit flavors and characters, or the positive vegetable characters, the herbal characters. And so for me, it's just lacking a little bit of that. Again, if I was talking at level 3, I'd be pushing it just into that medium plus, but it's still in that medium bracket. Okay. So in terms of quality, it's balanced, it's got a little bit of length and a little bit of intensity. Remember, it's intense on the nose, not very, very intense on the palate, but it does have a lot of complexity. So for me, with those kind of using this Blick scale, this idea of balance, length, intensity, complexity, this wine is very good, but it misses the outstanding because it doesn't quite have that matched intensity on the palate and that little bit extra length. Okay. So just for those of you who are studying the level 3, thinking of doing the level 3, a couple of extra things that we would consider before I take questions. Okay. On the nose, and also in your conclusion for level 3, you have to give a note about development. Okay, you have to say where in its life this wine is. Okay. And one of the tricks for that on the nose, and also coming to when you taste, is thinking about the relationship between the fresh fruit and the dried fruit. Okay, this relationship between primary and tertiary characteristics. Yeah. This is still a wine that has more primary characteristics than it has tertiary characteristics. Therefore, this is a developing wine, okay, when you're talking on the nose. When you're talking about aging, it's developing. You know, because you can already taste and smell some tertiary characteristics, that this wine will improve, okay? Therefore, it is a drink now, but will get better with aging, okay? So that's my assessment of the wine. For the person who was talking about body, let me just pull up the chat, sorry, because it doesn't see. Okay, so when you're thinking about body, this is how it feels in your mouth, the texture in your mouth. And I have 2 tricks for this, depending on what you're most familiar with, okay? The first one is to think about it in degrees from water to cream, heavy, what we call heavy cream in the States or in the UK, okay? So a light-bodied wine almost feels like water in your mouth, okay? It's not water, it's wine, you know this, but it almost feels watery, okay? Then, when you come into this medium bracket, this is where it begins to feel like milk, okay? So if you think about milk that has a percentage of fat, okay, we would call this, and I'm hoping Jacopo will help me out with some Italian terminology, but we would call this semi-skimmed, okay? So milk that has some fat, some texture, okay? Then if we look at full-bodied, this is what you're looking at when you think about cream, okay? That really, really rich texture of cream in your mouth. If you don't enjoy or eat dairy, okay, think about it in terms of juice, okay? So if you think about trying lemon or lime juice, it's very, very thin, very watery. This is your light-bodied wine. Okay? Medium-bodied is if you are drinking orange juice, but with the pulp from the oranges in it, yeah? Little bit of texture. Full-bodied is if you were drinking something like mango or papaya juice, something with a clear thickness when you're tasting it, yeah? So a little bit like a difference between having a glass of water for a light-bodied wine and having a thick milkshake or a smoothie for your full-bodied wine. So I hope that's helpful for helping the body. How long should we wait for getting the best of the wine? Well, that's really difficult. I feel like I should probably confer to Jacopo on this one. In my opinion, it definitely has another 5 years in it, but I would probably want to drink it somewhere in the next sort of two to 5 years, probably 2 to 4, because I don't want to lose that lovely floral character that it's got. Yeah, so that lovely kind of floral aromatic note, I think is really impressive for this wine. And so certainly for this particular wine that I'm tasting, I think sometime in the next 3 to 4 years would be perfect.
But if I can just add, for the scope of WSET level 2, they'll never ask you that, right? Like how long should it age? No. But not even level 3. So it's just like, you know, potential for aging. That's good enough, you know. Yeah. So just saying.
Yeah, even at level 3, they're not looking for you to tell them how many years. They just want to know, can it age? And what they're wanting to know, what they are asking is, will it improve? Okay, will this wine get better? And yes, this wine will, because those bright fruit characters will get deeper. We'll see this progression from fresh to dried fruit. And you've got so much tannin and acidity. Remember, as a wine ages, tannins soften, acidity softens. Okay, I like to think of it in I'm a very visual learner. So this wine would go from being a square, okay, to being round. It has its edges knocked off by the aging process. And that also helps me when I think about how it feels in the mouth. Okay, tannins and acidity are sharp. Yeah, they are quite angular. They're very structured aspects of a wine. These become rounder and softer as a wine ages. And that's really what WSET are looking for, is will this improve, and does it have the things it needs to age?
There's another question from Michael.
So the lack of orange in the wine color, does this mean, does this always mean that it's able to develop? Not necessarily. The orange in the rim of the wine is an indication of oxidation. Okay, so when there's oxygen contact with the wine, the chemical reaction means that you lose the polyphenolics, okay, and the anthocyanins change. Okay, super geek speak. But basically you begin to get this move from ruby to orange. All that tends to be is an indication of the age, not whether it will or won't develop. I hope that's answered the question. If not, hammer me in the chat for more details. It's not something to get totally hung up about. WSET are just looking for whether you can identify the difference between a ruby wine, which is very clearly red, and a garnet wine, which has this ring of orange, this slight move towards that kind of slightly orange hue in the wine.
Okay, I think we're gonna. I'm gonna ask Rebecca to wrap it up. But we are going to be doing an online course, level 2. Okay, Rebecca, do you want to just
come and join me?
Can you just tell them quickly what that means?
So you guys are all stuck at home. You have no excuse to take your WSET level 2 now. I'm sorry, I'm not accepting it. So next Friday and Saturday from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. I will be teaching WSET Level 2 theory classes. Okay, so this is an opportunity for you to get ahead with your WSET studies. We will do it very much like this, with all of the PowerPoints, all of the sessions. The only thing that won't be included is the tasting, because we will do that in person once we can get back to the office and the school and all the delicious wines that Franco has ready for me in the fridge. And this is not only an opportunity, I just want to say this, for those of you doing level 3, okay, this is an opportunity if you want to join us. I believe that Stevie and the team are working on a special rate because it's a great opportunity for revision, okay? Because remember, the grounding for level 3 really is the level 2 book. All of that stuff about grape varieties, where they are, moderating influences, winemaking, all of that grounding for level 3 comes from level 2. You're all stuck at home, come and join me, it's going to be great. If you join the course, you also get to re-watch the videos because we're going to record everything. So you can go back, you can use it as recap, and then you can join us for the tasting later in the year, which gives you an opportunity to study between the theory and the tasting, and then use that tasting as yet another piece of recap for you. It's a really great way to learn, is to have this theory grounding and then come back to it and put it together with the wines.
Did we announce next week's wine already?
We did, but for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a Roero Arnés. This is one of my all-time favorite grapes, guys, so no excuses. I want to see you all back here with an Arnés. It is an 18, okay? So if you can't get Fontana Ferreda, please just look for a Roero Arnés from 2018, and we'll taste that all together next week.
Just one last question from Sarah. She sent it like 10 times.
Oh yeah.
She said,
no.
Does a full body wine also mean a high aging potential?
No, not necessarily. The aging potential is more linked to flavor concentration, acid levels in white, and flavor concentration, acid and tannin in reds. We'll talk a little bit about that next week, in fact.
Okay, so it's same time next week, 6 p.m. for half an hour. Okay? Buon appetito.
If you want to join up for the level 2 course next week, or if you want more information, tag us in the social media or email info@italianwineacademy.com.
Thank you, everybody.
Ciao tutti.
Bye. Ciao.